we're actually up to, what our next steps are, and how we want to work with others to share and to scale. So I'm Kate Gilmartin, and I wear various hats. So my day job, I'm chief exec at the British Hydropower Association. But in the middle there, I'm a founder member of Community Energy England. Rossendale Valley Energy is the community benefit society that we set up to push forward the Net Zero Terrace Streets project. And Looped Energy Communities, that's a community interest company that we've set up as a joint venture with Rossendale Valley Energy and Centre for Energy Equality to help deploy the Net Zero Terrace Street solution. And then Great British Energy, I'm also a non-exec director on their board, advising on local. Oh, that's the words on there as well. And then in terms of who we are, so I've already mentioned Rossendale Valley Energy. We're a community benefit society. So we're volunteer-led, not-for-profit group that's focused on delivering net zero in Rossendale Valley. And really we're really about delivering affordable energy and healthy, warm homes. And we started the Net Zero Terrace Street project about 4.5 years ago. And as you can see from all those different logos, we've been working with what I call a coalition of the willing, who are working hard with us to try and find a solution to getting people to healthy, warm homes and affordable energy. And we are very locally based, and we're really keen and have a mission around developing local jobs, local skills, building capacity within Rossendale Valley Energy itself, the Community Benefit Society. And we've now got 6.5 FTEs working with us, which is great. And as I say, we also set up Looped Energy Communities, which is more of a national hub to our local spoke to help push forward the Net Zero Terrace Street solution. So what's the problem we're trying to address? Well, I think you're probably all quite familiar with the fact that we've got huge amounts of terrace homes in the UK, especially here in the northwest and across the north more generally in industrial areas. So there's actually 6 million small terraced homes in the UK. And when I say small, I mean kind of 3 beds, back-to-backs, small footprint, and often with these kind of smaller backyards as well. A lot of these homes are built pre-1919, and some of them will be on gas, some of them won't be on gas. But really, in terms of decarbonising solutions, the obvious solution is to put electric boilers in. And when you think about EPCs and private rented sector, we are beginning to see quite a lot of electric boilers going in, which are obviously cheap to put in, but really expensive to run for the householder. So we're really focused on creating a street-by-street whole system solution for homes like this in the picture. So the solution is based around mixed tenure. So it doesn't matter whether you're private rented, owner occupied. We want to knock on a door and have the same solution for everyone. We're focused on areas that are going to have lower income and therefore higher potential for fuel poverty. And this picture here really highlights the fact that there's little space for things like air source heat pumps. So there's space constraints and noise constraints. And this is before you even think about back-to-back terraces as well that have no outdoor space. And although lots of people and local authorities are looking at things like centralised heat networks, so really big district heating schemes, often they'll go past or they won't go out to domestic housing as well. They're really focused on large heat loads. And often there's kind of a conversation around, well, we'll get to these houses later. I spoke to Bristol recently, and you know, they're certainly saying the same. And it's like, yeah, but when? You know, these are the homes that need affordable energy and healthy, warm homes first and fastest. So it's about trying to find that solution faster than we currently are. So why street by street? So I think the key is that developing solutions for these types of homes is complex. And although there might be grants available, there's often quite low uptake on these grants because of that complexity. And a lot of initiatives tend to be fit and forget. And obviously, we've had reports out recently about EWI, and every time there's a big grant, there's a big rush of people who perhaps aren't going to deliver the best solutions. And it's just, kind of, we've done the solution, pay us, and off we go. And there's no, there's often issues around the quality of work, etc. So we think a better solution is to do this street by street, in neighbourhoods, but really community-led, with a fair share ethos and a long-term support and care ethos as well. So really, it's going from something like this, which I don't know whether you've looked at having your own home retrofitted, but it's really complex. An individual householder either has to work with a landlord who they're going to get three. I always think as soon as you say now you need to get 3 quotes, then you've lost most people, because we're all busy. We've all got jobs, families, various factors that are competing for our time. So this kind of complexity is just not going to deliver the solutions that we need to deliver. So we're looking much more at a solution that kind of brings this together into a community-based solution, where you have a single delivery vehicle, which is kind of a wrapper. And we're looking at that from financing, heat, retrofit, engaging the community, adding local energy in there as well to subsidise the price of power, etc. So our model is focused on removing the complexity for each householder and taking that complexity into a local organisation that's community-led to enable them to develop the solution with the householders on behalf of the householders. So the Net Zero Terrace Streets solution, what actually is it? So before I talk about that, I just want to talk about what success needs to encompass. And I put this in a stool because I always think it's quite useful to think about a 3-legged stool with the various component parts that give that stool rigidity. So any kind of solution has to think about behaviour and the behavioural change it will take for people to accept a new type of heating solution, or even the fabric retrofit that goes with that. So we've got to think really hard about people. This is a people-based solution, and if people don't want it, then we're not going to get very far. It's got to include the financial solution. So it has to be no upfront cost to householders, and it has to be the same solution for everybody. So we can't knock on one door and say, right, you need to get property linked finance and you need to get a HUGS grant. We've got to have the same solution as we knock on those doors, because it's all about delivery at scale and delivery at speed as well, because at the end of the day, as soon as you put a shovel in the ground, it starts costing money. And then it's got to have the technical solution as well. So it has to be a whole system approach. So not just doing solar and storage, not just doing fabric, not just doing heat, not just thinking about flexibility benefits in the future. It's doing all those things at once. And then those kind of struts in the stool are, the solution has to be place-based. Each community is different. It has to be trusted, which really goes back to a community-led solution. It has to be really well coordinated and really clear to people what the stages are and where they're up to. And it has to give people assurance as well. So we have to make sure that we're ticking off all these things in everything we do if we want that stool to not fall over. So that's kind of our founding principles in a way of the solution that we're delivering. And I'll go into those different things a little bit more shortly. So what's this look like in practice? So we've had various bits of funding, innovation funding. And as I say, we've been going now for 4 years and slowly building up this solution in terms of what it is and how we deploy, and the key components that will give us that stool. So the route to deployment, so there's various things that we're going to quickly run through. And first of all, I've got the stool up in the right-hand side because that's our founding principles, and we always have to go back to that and say, are we doing these things? But really, we're thinking about a system of systems, and there's 5 distinct systems that we have to develop in tandem. And those 5 things are: we've got to deliver the physical infrastructure. So that is the heat pumps and the fabric retrofit and any solar and storage. So we've got to get kit into people's homes. We've got to create demand. People are going to want to be part of the solution. So that's all about a community first engagement process, which we have a methodology called reach, engage and retain, because it's not just about getting people on board in the here and now. We've got to take them on this long journey, and we've got to show them what the end point is and show them how that stage process looks for each individual owner or renter or householder. We've got to have local energy champs. We've got to have deep trust if we want to get uptake in areas which are often underserved areas as well. Then the orange box is the virtual infrastructure. Now, this is really the smart system. So if I just kind of think, if you just think about people who've got Octopus Agile tariffs because they can afford an EV and a battery and solar panels, and they're really pleased with themselves because nowadays on a Sunday, they might actually get paid to consume energy because their kit is basically part of a smart system. So essentially what we're trying to do is get that smart system, but to people within these streets to make sure they're not left behind in the benefits of the future smart system. The red box is organisational governance, and this is all about creating a lift and shift model for different communities that has got the same fundamental principles, which is community empowerment, community agency, autonomous local delivery, but feeding back to the central hub, which is looped energy communities, guided by, but always iterating this process and gathering learning as we go. So those are the kind of, and then there's the digital spine that runs through everything. So this is all about data and how you kind of codify these processes so you can take it from community to community. And essentially you've got this kind of data spine that runs all the way from the first contact to delivery and operation and maintenance, essentially. So those are the 5 key systems. And then we have, which I'll talk about a bit later, is the kind of an H-stage methodology, which actually enables the deployment as an end-to-end process. And there's a load of tools, a toolkit that underpins all this activity. And everything we're doing goes back to that stool. Are we doing this in a whole systems approach? Are we delivering a trusted solution? So, excuse me, thinking about those kind of 5 systems, the first one is that technical solution. So how do we deliver a whole systems approach that gives affordable energy and healthy, warm homes? So essentially, we're looking at what fabric upgrades we need to do. And it will depend on various, that each home is going to be slightly different. But essentially it will be a mix of loft insulation, internal wall insulation, maybe external wall insulation, air tightness measures, solar panels, maybe battery storage, windows, doors, mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. So that's kind of the home in terms of what we're looking at delivering and reducing the heat load of that house, essentially. Oh, and very importantly, necessary repairs. There's no point in putting solar panels on a roof that needs replacing. And actually, a lot of homes, because these are very old housing stock, and sometimes in areas that are underserved, it's about fixing the gutters, drying out walls that might have been damp from broken gutters, etc. So it's thinking about that building envelope and making that building envelope fit for purpose for the next 40 years and being an efficient building envelope. So it's all about the home itself, making that efficient home warm and cozy. And then the heat itself, we're looking at ambient loop ground source heat pump. So essentially, this is buried pipework in the street where each borehole could go up to about 150 metres and should serve 2 terrace properties. And basically that borehole takes heat out of the ground and warms water to about 12 degrees C. And that water comes into the house, into this shoebox heat pump here on the right, which is a 4.8 kilowatt, I think it is, heat pump, where the heat pump basically acts like a boiler and upgrades that warm, tepid water, 12 degrees, to 45 degrees, which is the flow temperature for the central heating. And you therefore decarbonised your heat. So part of what we've been doing is delivering 3 demonstrator homes. And it's really been a case of learning by doing. And we've taken a slightly different approach to retrofit. A lot of retrofit can be done to deep retrofit. Well, whereas what we've done is we just want to bring the heat load of the house down to meet the heat pump load, essentially 5.8 kilowatts. I have to double check, but that's 5.8. I've got it might be 4.8 kilowatts, but essentially we're reducing the heat load of the house down. And we've got about 4 main archetypes of homes in Rossendale. So each one will have its own retrofit design. So obviously mid-terrace, we've done 2 mid-terraces in the same street, and they're through terraces. Obviously you have end terraces that are through terrace, and then there's back-to-back mid-terrace and back-to-back end terrace, and we've done 1 back-to-back end terrace as well. So ideally what we want to create is one design per archetype that's going to be adjusted to each individual property. So we've got like a foundational archetype, and then each home will be slightly different because some might have room and roof, some might not have room and roof, but essentially we've got a foundational model that gets the ball rolling. So the 3 homes that we've done, you can see here on the pictures, we've got 2 mid-terraces and then the back-to-back end terrace. And you probably can notice it's sandstone, which actually gives a really high U value. It's very conductive sandstone. So it's been quite hard to reduce the heat load of the house down to what we need it to be without spending a huge amount of money, essentially. So it's been interesting how the through terraces have got a much lower heat load than the back-to-back end terrace, because this side wall here, this gable end wall here, is essentially the same U value as having a wooden door. So that's been interesting. But anyway, those are the 3 homes that we've been working on, and you can see from the heat load that the current, well, it was the heat load previously was 15 kilowatts, 17.5 and 11.9, and this is what we're getting it down to 3.8, 4.6 and 4.4 through things like room and roof insulation, basement floor soffits. We've retained some windows, we've replaced doors, reducing the air change per hour with air tightness measures, and we put mechanical ventilation heat recovery in as well, and they've all got PV and battery. So it's been a really interesting process, and because we're not going down to kind of deep retrofit standards, it's been quite interesting how we've had to work with the retrofit designer, and I'll show you some photos now. So this is getting the site ready, because obviously we're doing boreholes as well, so we have to be in the street, which comes with complexity. And it's just things like having water available for the drill rig, etc. We had to cordon off a car park. The 2 of the houses are quite central to Rawtenstall. And it's just worth saying these houses are owned by Rossendale Borough Council. Oh, Mike, do you want to come in?
I appreciate that this wouldn't be possible for back-to-back terraces, but would this work sort of using the gunnels or the sort of back alleys rather than the main street? Because wouldn't that be easier with getting it past the sort of highways teams and things?
Yeah, exactly. Although some of the houses we did look at previously, the kind of the back alley is actually unregistered. So you've then got the complexity of having to work in unregistered land. So there's no kind of easy solution, but we have been working with Rossendale Borough Council to develop what could be the basis for a local development order. And we think that learning can go local authority to local authority. Obviously, each local authority will be different, but essentially we can get an LDO, a local development order, for an area, possibly that matches the heat zoning. Then actually, in terms of having to do section 50 for each street, for example, you could maybe just have a blanket, okay, section 50 for the LDO area. So yeah, it's quite long-winded at the moment, but we think there's ways where that could be speeded up. But yeah, here's a picture of these houses. We actually did the boreholes at the back of the houses. It wasn't quite an alleyway because it went onto the car park, but it meant we didn't have to get section 50 for those 2 houses, although we did for the back-to-back terrace. So I mentioned repairs. We've had to replace all 3 roofs because they're in poor state of repair, and we think that actually probably most houses will need new roofs unless they've had repairs done recently, because most of the houses in these areas haven't been re-roofed for many years. So we re-roofed before the solar went on. And then here's the boreholes. You can see the drill rig here on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side here, and that's going down 150 meters. But it's quite contained, and that drill rig can go quite close to houses as well. And then obviously you then have to do the trenching from the borehole itself. The pipework has to get trenched to the home as you would with gas pipes. And then you can see here on the heat pump itself next to the washing machine, and that's been plumbed in there. And doing the fabric retrofit, so this is the loft getting insulated, and obviously doing the taping, etc., for the air tightness. And then lastly is all about monitoring. So we did some pre-works monitoring, and we've got monitoring in now, and we're about to do winter monitoring as well to see what the impact of the retrofit will be. And I think we're going to do another webinar in early February, I think the 6th of February, where we'll show what the outcomes have been in terms of the heating season. So we're looking forward to seeing what that's going to look like. So all but one house is still yet to be finished, and that, because that has some complexities around whether to do internal wall insulation or external wall insulation. It's the gable end back-to-back terrace, and also the tenants have just moved out, so we waited to do that internal wall insulation while tenants have moved out. But the other two houses are now complete, so we can start recording that data. So going back to our kind of 5 systems, we've looked at the physical infrastructure, and obviously that's complex in itself. There's always going to be disruption. There's no way around the fact that even if you're not doing things like internal wall insulation, even if you're doing windows, doors, there is going to be disruption involved. So it's all about getting the buy-in and creating the demand. And this goes back to the behavioural leg of the stool. And that's why we think it's so important that this is led by the community. It's place-based solution. It's rooted in community governance and rooted in community ownership, and has to have a high level of local trust. Communities have got to see that there's going to be availability of local jobs, upskilling local communities. There's got to be that quality assurance. Has to be well coordinated, and there needs to be that legacy support with visible benefits. So we're putting in, a bit like Electricity North West or Cadent, we're putting infrastructure in that needs to be managed over the next 40 years. So part of the model is that local development organisation will always be there to do that ongoing monitoring, and to be there to do that continued customer engagement and working with the community. And also we hope that the local development organisation that supports this delivery will hopefully go on to do other things like EV car clubs, or greening the streets, or sustainable urban drainage, because essentially you've got a community organisation that's funded through the infrastructure delivery. So unlike, whereas with community benefit societies like Rossendale Valley Energy, we're very hand to mouth with grants and grant applications, whereas actually if you have revenue associated to an infrastructure, then over the long term you've actually got the ability to do more. So it's all about that local engagement. This is Joe and Lou, some of our energy champions out and about. So we spent a lot of time as well thinking about what our kind of service blueprint is. How do we do that customer engagement, customer research, and everything's kind of supported by our digital spine, which is our Fairer Warmth platform. So it's all about reaching people first, then engaging people with the energy champions in terms of energy efficiency advice, or getting them to think about what their future will be in terms of the house itself, in terms of upgrades, repairs, healthy warm homes, etc. And moving people forward to think about, okay, well, do you want to be part of Net Zero Terrace Streets? Would you want to have a healthier warm home? Do you want to have a heat pump rather than gas? retaining people, that's all about going into homes then and saying to people, we'd like to monitor, would you like an energy audit? And that's where we're kind of beginning to really build our data house by house. Retrofit next comes on, what is the actual retrofit design going to be? And then part of the deployment, what's going to happen when, and all part of that coordination through the Fairer Warmth app, through the Energy Champion, so people know who to contact, they know exactly what's happening when. And then, of course, there's the operation as well. So handing over to make sure that people know how a heat pump works, etc., and having that ongoing support through an Energy Champion and Energy Club helpline. So it's an inclusive end-to-end journey, which doesn't finish, because essentially you've still got kit in your home and you've still got someone helping you to manage that kit, a bit like we have, Cadent or ENWL. We're also looking at this journey, not just for owner occupiers, but also landlords and renters as well. So we've done soft market testing with landlords, and of course they've got to meet requirements in terms of EPC. And they're really keen to talk to us, because essentially we're going to help coordinate delivery of them getting an upgraded EPC at no cost to themselves as part of a street by street approach. And of course the outcome is affordable energy, healthy warm home, things like improved indoor air quality, because we are taking people off gas. We want to cap the gas off and put in electric cookers, induction hobs and induction pans. So it is about getting better air quality, not just outside the houses, but inside the houses as well. So that's kind of our community demand creation and community engagement system. And then in the orange, we've got the virtual infrastructure. And essentially that is the smart system. So as I said about Octopus Agile tariffs, essentially that's people who are able to have their bits of their kit in their home turned on and off to help balance the local grid and actually aggregate that local balancing and sell that on to the network as flexibility. And essentially that revenue, what we're trying to do is ring fence that revenue for the community groups, for the community to return to reduce people's bills. So we've got a concurrent program with ENWL where we're building this smart local energy system, and it's all about grid management, but it's all about fair share. So rather than the big six getting a big chunk of that future value, we're ring fencing that and returning that to the consumers. And this is our kind of again kind of our ethos here, is that this is the work we're doing with ENWL. We're trying to ensure that we get the value of local, and to get the value of local, we've got to have visibility. So the networks currently can't see anything that's happening behind the transformer. So through home energy management systems and monitoring, we can have that visibility of what's happening on the network. And if you can monitor it and you can measure it, you can monetize it. So we're unlocking that value. And all of this is about coordination to make sure that we're coordinating in a planned phased approach so we can maximize that value. And then this big wheel is what's in the middle is the fairer share. And that's what we're developing is our fairer share logic. So essentially, this is about creating smart systems that are not only scalable, but they're ethical and they're fair. They balance individual and collective benefit through transparent value flows. We're building resilience into the system. We're making sure this is values focused. So it's not just about power, it's about people. It's accessible. So, for example, digital inclusion, that's why it's so important to have energy champions there. And how do we not leave people behind? Obviously, everything's got to be compliant. And there's a lot of additionality here in terms of how do we make sure we're getting that data protected for our householders. So it's all about retaining value in the local community, building resilience, empowering communities, and reversing extraction. Because if you think about our energy bills, everything's kind of extracted and values extracted. So how can we make sure that we're optimizing and balancing local energy in a way that retains that value? Oh, right. Okay, and then the fourth section, fourth system is organisation. So what's the structured and the methodology for delivery, and how can that enable the financial flows, and how can that enable investment? So this is kind of really key, and it's really based in the cooperative movement. And essentially what we've got here right in the middle is a local community organisation. And this local community energy organisation is heavily supported by looped energy communities. So essentially, looped is this kind of national hub that's supporting the licensing and quality assurance and the smart system to how to develop Net Zero Terrace Streets. But the local community organisation is really there to engage the householders, create that demand, work with the local supply chain, look at the jobs and skills that could be built, and all the while supported by loops through the 8-stage methodology for Net Zero Terrace Street. And the local authority obviously is a key component to this. It's not got any arrows in it because we know that some local authorities just don't have capacity. So this organisational governance has to be able to stand up on its own without local authority, but really they have to be involved and they have to be integral. A big part of what we're doing is setting up an energy club, which is essentially a co-op for any householders that sign up to the system. So when you sign your connection agreement to just connect to the boreholes, you've got the option to tick to be part of an energy club. And that's really where the benefits of the smart system come. And it's a bit like collective switch. You know, it does mean you have to be with the energy supplier that the whole community is with as well. But that's where you get the value from the aggregation, the flexibility of the smart system. But this energy club's really important because this is a big governance. This is kind of democratic oversight for the asset co. So the asset co is where we want to get the funding to deliver the infrastructure. And we've been talking to the National Wealth Fund, you know, we've been talking to Social Investment Bank, and they're interested in loaning funds to this asset co to deliver the infrastructure. But we don't want that infrastructure to be sold on to another and have a Thames Water incident. You know, so this golden share is the Energy Club has a golden share in this asset co. So the Energy Club has democratic oversight over the physical infrastructure. And by working with Looped, which is running the smart local energy system, it's also got democratic oversight over that virtual infrastructure, all that data, all that smart system, all the flexibility, etc. So we think that's a really important part of this model, is that community-based governance where people own their data and have democratic oversight over the infrastructure that's being delivered around them, that they're part of. There is a standing charge, which I'll talk about shortly, but essentially the householder will still pay an energy bill because it is going to be consuming electricity, but that energy bill will be greatly reduced through the fabric retrofit and the reduction of the heat load of the house, plus the efficiency of the heat pump. But there'll also be a standing charge, which is essentially there to pay back the physical infrastructure. But that standing charge and the energy bill has to be lower than the people are paying at the moment. And this is really where we're working at the moment with government to say this has to be subsidised with a grant, because the communities we're working with need this standing charge heavily subsidised so we can lower bills, because lots of people will be underheating their homes. Sorry, I'll pause for breath there. Sorry, I'm talking quite a lot, and do shout up if you've got any questions. Sylvia.
Hello, I'm an imposter, by the way, because I'm not anywhere near Salford, but I work with business in the community and was introduced to this session by my colleague who is in Salford and also on the call today, Lydia. I'm interested there because, well, I'm interested in all of it, but particularly you've just mentioned working with government for subsidy. How far have you got? Is that national government that you're talking about there?
Yes, yeah. So we've been working with DESNZ, Department of Energy, and we have been on the Net Zero Living Pathfinder project for a year and a half now. So this is a funded project by Department of Energy and also Innovate UK. And we are hopefully, I believe, when the Warm Home Plan does come out, we should be a case study within that. So we're really interested in creating a blended finance model where we use Warm Homes Plan to cover the retrofit costs, and we work with people like Social Investment Bank and National Wealth Fund to cover the infrastructure costs, and whatever we need in the middle to reduce the standing charge, so it's very cheap for people. That needs to come from government in a grant, but we want to get that in terms of a pilot project, you know, a grant funded pilot project. So yeah, we've been talking to them for a good few years, and I think the key here is that we want to get to non-grant dependency. And we think in more affluent areas, as long as we've got a model that means that people's bills don't go up, but they've got the potential to go down as the benefits of flexibility are more lucrative, then actually we won't need to have that grant funding. We can create a model that actually is investable. So it's all about creating an investable business model. But for communities that are underserved, where fuel poverty is an issue and people are very likely to be underheating and there's houses are very likely to have more repairs to be done, we are going to be saying to government, yeah, these communities do need additional grant funding on top of things like Warm Homes Plan and an investable business model. In fact, actually, I've got a slide here on how it's paid for. So yes, we've been working on a financial model, which is part of our data spine, which I'll talk about shortly. And yeah, essentially, it's about creating a blended finance approach. So we want short to medium term grants and a blended finance model. It has to be no upfront cost to householders, although there could be a model in more affluent areas where people might want to put some upfront capital down to reduce their standing charge over the longer period of time. But we're focused on areas that we think need this first and fastest. Those people who are in areas where fuel poverty is highest. So we are saying to government that this is an important model to grant fund in the early days. But we are, as I say, wanting to get to non-grant dependency, and it is an investable business model. And really the standing charge is similar to a pay-as-you-save model, because you're reducing the amount you're spending on electricity and you're basically paying off capital for the infrastructure itself. And this is kind of our equation, really. So we're going to be putting in heat system infrastructure, boreholes, heat pumps, fabric retrofit, wet system, in-home controls. And we'll also have to add in there OPEX, any replacements for things like inverters, CapEx, payback. And this is all this has to fund a standing charge. But then you're going to have savings as well. So you're going to have reduced heat load at the house. You're going to have some solar. There's community-owned solar. We're looking to do off-site renewables as well in a local energy model, in a local energy market. And also we should get benefits from doing collective aggregation of and flexibility benefits as well. So this has to then be there's a cost to consumer in terms of the revenue and revenue to the SPV as well. You've got to pay back the debt. So we have got a financial model now that looks at all this. So we're able to look at all these sensitivities and toggle those sensitivities. So for each area, we'll have a very separate cluster-based financial model where we can play around and say, okay, well, if Social Investment Bank want a 4% return on this bit of infrastructure, what does that do to our model? So that's where we're up to in terms of the financial model, which is really exciting actually, because which I'll talk about shortly when in terms of next steps. And this is kind of our stages of grant versus investment. So at the moment we're on a 3-house pilot, fully grant funded. We want to get grant and investment into a larger pilot, which we think will be a blended finance model. So Warm Homes Plan plus investment from infrastructure investors plus grant funding, as I say, to top up or reduce down that standing charge to home to householders. But we want to get to a point where we are non-grant dependent, but that really relies on economies of scale, the learning curve, the lift and shift model in terms of the governance and what we're doing around that. And obviously in terms of, supply chain, if the more scale you've got, having a supply chain that's ready, and also the aggregated benefits of things like flexibility. So then the final system in our 5-system approach is this digital spine. And this is through the Fairer Warmth platform. And it goes end to end across our system. So it starts with people. So people basically saying, I'm interested, I live at this house, here's my name. Then we get details of the property. which we then build into a building energy model. And obviously energy champions are there to support this as well. This isn't up to a householder to enter this on their Fairer Warmth portal. They might be able to do on their own, but there'll definitely be an energy champion assigned to those people. And then once we've got a good standard building energy model, we might have done some energy audits. We might have done a blower door test. And then we can build the retrofit design and costing that retrofit, which then flows into our techno-economic model. And this is per cluster area. And then, as I said earlier, that just spits out the kind of financial model for that area, which enables us to look at, well, okay, how much grant funding will we need? What's the maximum that an IRR could be for an investor, for example? So we can get a real understanding of how that financial model can stack up. And then the home energy management system. So basically anything that the householder parameter, how they want their house to be warm, their work pattern, how many people live there, that's all sat in the Fairer Warmth platform as well, interfacing with their home energy management system. And then you get the community energy management aggregator. So basically that aggregates everybody's home energy management system together to give this view of the aggregation of houses. And that's where you get the smart system. So Electricity Northwest can see exactly what's happening in terms of their network. So what's the load on the grid? Do we need some voltage control, for example? Do we need to turn off some people's heat pumps? Can we preheat their homes first? And people will have the option to max my flex or hands off my flex. So if you want to maximize your flex and get bigger benefits from your energy club, then therefore you'll say, well, as long as my house is never goes below 19 degrees, you can turn my heat pump on and off, etc. So that will be very much up to the individual. So yeah, so that's kind of the end-to-end digital spine. And it's all kind of user-friendly. So this is the householder portal. So this is where people can register interest. It shows them their journey. It tells them when they've got an appointment, etc. And then we have the Energy Champion portal. So this tells the Energy Champion where they're up to in terms of their tasks, if they've got appointments, if they've got energy audits to do, etc. And then there's also a supplier portal as well. So in terms of people who might be available to do blower door testing, or people who are interested in supplying as a contractor for Net Zero Terrace Streets. And there's an admin portal, so we can see how many houses have signed up. We can see what part of the journey they're up to. And it's all about getting critical mass, because really we need to have 30% of a street express interest for us to actually look to deploy the solution as well. So that's kind of a run through of what we're doing. So as I say, we've been developing this for 4.5 years now, and we've developed a really big body of work that we're wanting to share with other communities, with other local authorities, and use this to hopefully replicate the Net Zero Terrace solution in other communities. So alongside the kind of 5 systems, we have this kind of end-to-end 8-stage methodology, which goes through, first contact, pre-feasibility, feasibility, creating demand, confirming demand, deployment, post-deployment and expansion, and operation and maintenance. So we've kind of codified this entire journey in the work we've been doing. And then underpinning each of those stages, we've got this kind of toolkit as well. So what are the templates, the legal templates, the governance frameworks, the data collection, data governance? So all these are sat at the appropriate stage of this kind of 8-stage methodology, which creates this kind of large deployment pack, essentially, that's supported all the way through by looped energy communities, but really the delivery people on the ground are the local community organisation supported by looped. So there's lots of tools that sit behind this in terms of, well, as I say, templates, guides, methodology documents, Gantt charts. Yeah, there's a huge body of work that we've built up, including the local authority handbook. I talked earlier about things like the local development order, but what's this look like from the local authority perspective? And then looped, as I say, supports this. So startup support, local development, licensing, peer learning, capacity building, quality assurance. And I think what we want to try and do is just create efficiencies where we can. So a key part of what we want to try and deliver with the quality assurance and the due diligence is that we want funders and investors to see the same methodology, whether it's Toxteth or Cardiff. You know, wherever there's terrace streets, they can see the same deployment methodology, the same governance in terms of the asset co, etc. So they can look to aggregate in terms of investing, because really we want to get, you know, pension funds, long-term patient capital that won't look to invest unless it's 50 million. So it is about aggregation and getting that scale. And to do that, we have to create uniformity and standardization in the process, but at the same time make sure it's locally delivered and locally empowered, with communities having that agency to deliver. So what's next? So currently, as I say, we're still on the Net Zero Living project, which goes out to the end of February. We're also on the Network Innovation Allowance, and that's all about testing the smart system. And we'll use that to springboard into a Strategic Innovation Fund beta funding bid. We're also working with Leeds City Council just to look at an area in Armley, which is 102 back-to-back terraces there, just doing some kind of feasibility work with them. They're already doing the retrofit fabric, but we're looking to see how they can add in solar storage, decarbonisation, a heat and smart system. So that's yet to start though. And then we've also just got a small amount of funding to carry on the work we're doing out to March, to look at 3 pilot cluster areas where we're going to do our stage 1 to 3/4 of our 8-stage methodology. And essentially we're looking at cluster development in Rochdale and Middleton, obviously continuing Rossendale, and we've also been working with Bridgend in the Pathfinder programme as well. Oh, Mike, do you want to come in?
So has that funding been confirmed now?
Yes.
Oh,
so we've got the funding out to March, and yeah, and I think what I'm excited about with Middleton and Rochdale, but there's Middleton Mayoral Development Corporation, and again, it's kind of how do we make sure that we're embedding in community governance, this kind of community governance and the kind of cooperative movement ethos, and returning these terraces. Obviously Rochdale was where the cooperative movement began, so I think that's kind of quite poignant that we want to try and revive that in some way through with the housing stock as well. So that's excuse me, that's where next. And then so what next in terms of this? Obviously we've had this webinar today, but we've got another one which is on Thursday, and that's one of the webinars we've been running a series of through the Pathfinder programme. So it is going to be quite technical on the finance. So this introductory one hopefully gives you a catch up. So it means that if you go to the one on Thursday, which is going to be a deeper dive into the techno-economic model and the financial model, and like we showed that slide earlier with that kind of balance between affordable for homeowners but investable, and what's that standing charge need to be and how do we get it down. So I think that is everything from me. So I'll just stop sharing, and then if there's any questions, I mean, I can send the slides around. I know there's quite a lot there, so it was a bit of an end-to-end run through. So hopefully it wasn't too much information. Sylvia.
Yeah, there might be too much information. I am drowning, but it's all fascinating. I'd be really appreciative if you would send the slides out as well. I can see that you've got England and Wales. There's Bridgend included there for Wales. Does this extend to Scotland as well, do you think?
I think the methodology itself can go anywhere. We haven't been working in Scotland yet, but yeah, we'd be happy to work with Scottish community groups who have, I mean, a lot of people say, oh, it'd be really good to transfer this to tenement buildings, and the same principles would apply, in terms of a shared community heat infrastructure with boreholes. So I think the principles can be applied to Scotland, no problem.
With regards to the funding that you were looking at, are there any differences? Because often things are England and Wales only and Scotland is different. Are you aware of anything separate?
Well, I mean, Scotland have got the their SNIB, Scottish National Infrastructure Bank. National Wealth Fund goes all over the country. In terms of grant funding, they have CARES, which is really good. They actually have more grant funding available than we do in England. But no, I think it's each area, and I think it's very local authority driven as well, will potentially have a different blended finance model. But we're really gearing up to have the Warm Homes Plan, but delivering it in a cluster-based approach, and using that funding to deliver the fabric, which is obviously, as you know, the hardest thing to have any kind of payback on. We've got to pick up those repairs. We think that people like Social Investment Bank or National Wealth Fund are interested in either funding the borehole, the pipe work, or certainly with National Wealth Fund, they're interested in loaning to local authorities to then fund that borehole pipe work, because it's a long-term asset and it's fairly low risk. Once it's in. So your risk is really, you've got default on standing charge, etc. But that's no different to broadband. So we kind of often couch it like a broadband rollout as well in terms of infrastructure. Right. Any other questions or thoughts, or how relevant it is in your areas? We're always really keen to get feedback. Sorry.
I think it's obviously very relevant in our area, given the stock that we have across Salford, and also the slow rate of pickup of the work that we're doing to try and encourage both those who can afford to pay and those who can't, in terms of refit of properties. And so I think there's lots of scope there. It also kind of fits with something that I wanted to do, which was in each of the wards to have one demonstrator street, and try and throw everything at a street. Do you know what I mean? So try and get them to take up, to put the gardens back in, take out the astroturf and the paving. So yeah, I'm very interested in trying to see how we can move this forward in Salford. Sorry, I missed the start. I'm Councillor Mike McCusker, I'm the lead member for Planning, Transport and Sustainable Development. Ah,
brilliant. Yeah, and I don't know whether you've seen the Hull Living with Water project, but just when you're saying that demonstrator street, that's what they did. I mean, it was more about sustainable urban drainage, and obviously, Hull's a metre below sea level or whatever. So Rosemead Terrace is the terrace street that they did this kind of demonstrator on. So we've taken quite a lot of learning in terms of how they did their engagement. So I think, I think seeing is believing. And we've obviously worked with Salford Energy House as well, and I'm really keen to kind of go, okay, well, that's in the lab. Okay, what's it look like in reality? How do we engage people? It is all about that uptake. And hence why I think it's so important that it's rooted in community governance, that sense of ownership, and bringing people together through cooperative movement as well. Brilliant. Lydia.
Hi, thanks for sharing all the information. I think it's going to take me a second to digest it all. I'm also from Business in the Community. I'm Sylvia's colleague, doing some community-led climate engagement in Salford. And I think there's a lot of synergy here in terms of conversations that we've had with communities through our initial work and kind of, where it could go. So maybe that's a separate conversation, but I think, it would be really interesting to see how this could work in Salford, and maybe kind of the scalability through our wider programme. So we run a national programme called, it's currently called the Community Climate Fund. It's being rebranded, where we're doing community-led climate action across 3/4, if you count Sylvia's work in Aberdeen, so Bradford and Teesside. We've been funding some projects through a sort of business investment pot, and then looking for further business investment to keep that going, to keep it sustainable. But I think, as a summary, there's lots of synergies between kind of what we're hearing from communities and business interest in what's happening and what you guys are doing. So could be worth another conversation.
That sounds really good. It'd be good to catch up these separately, Lydia, because I think the key here, I mean, I've said it a few times, local jobs, local skills, local supply chain.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that's all part of the kind of deep trust in the community. It's like, well, if I'm going to have someone in my house, I know I want to know where they're from and who they are. And so what we've done in Rossendale is we've had a really good contractor and we've developed that relationship locally. And he wants to apprentice it, and he's got the same. He shares our ethos that this won't happen unless you can make sure you've got local jobs, local skills for local people. And yeah, so I think that's again goes back to working with whoever's on the ground in terms of community organisations, because they're going to have those links. And this isn't about getting a big framework and parachuting people in. I'd rather do this slower. But make sure that you're building in that kind of apprenticeships as well at the same time, because this is a long-term delivery plan. Mike?
It was for Lydia, really. You were saying that there's sort of synergies. Are there sort of people that you've come across that you think should be hearing about this particularly, that we need to be speaking to, getting this information to?
I think just general, so when we've summarised some of the conversations, I think a lot of general consensus from community organisations, whether they're speaking on behalf of their organisations or themselves as residents, feel quite disenfranchised from the general sort of household decarbonisation conversation, and would love to be involved in other more community level conversations that bridge that sort of information gap and do the myth busting. And I know that that's kind of coming out on a more national level through campaigns and lots of other organisations, and I know local authorities are doing some of that, but I think there's always going to be people that sort of fall through the cracks. So it's only a small representation, I guess, from who I've spoken to, but I think there's probably greater appetite than is maybe being seen so far in terms of people wanting to do their bit in their households and what they can do. Yeah, and especially if there is an avenue to include sort of community anchor organisations to build that trust, then I think there's another avenue there. So that bit of a vague answer, Mike, but I think yeah, there's definitely interest. It's just trying to figure out exactly who those people are.
Because ideally we want that interest to come from the community and us support that rather than us